Welcome to BL Stories, where romance, drama, and unforgettable boys' love come to life. Love knows no limits, and the best stories aren't always straight. Subscribe now and join our growing BL-loving family. Chapter 8. Nathan's POV. I knew I'd made a mistake. It was reckless of me to let things go that far with him, especially when I knew he had feelings for me. I should have been focused on my assignment, yet in just a few minutes, all the control I prided myself on had slipped away. Like countless others before me, I gave in to temptation. I told myself it would be nothing more, but here I was, second-guessing everything. I looked at him again, his flushed cheeks, long lashes, and slightly parted lips. Even in sleep, he looked so trusting, so vulnerable. My gaze lingered, and I realized how much I had enjoyed being with him, far more than I had expected. He had asked me to be close to him, insisting it could be simple, without all the complications that usually came with emotions. At first, I believed him, but no one could look at another person the way he had looked at me and truly mean it was nothing more. His eyes last night had spoken of something deeper, something that frightened me because it felt dangerously close to real. And yet, I couldn't deny how good it felt. To be seen as someone who mattered, someone who could make another person's world brighter, it was both terrifying and addictive. He stirred in his sleep, mumbling something before settling again. I let out a quiet sigh. Surely, these strange emotions were nothing more than the product of being stuck in this place for almost 2 years. Maybe loneliness had clouded my judgment. Yes, that was it. It wasn't real. It couldn't be. I told myself again. It was just a physical release, nothing more. Something simple. Something that didn't have to mean anything. If I convinced myself of that, maybe I could keep it going without letting it become something I wasn't ready for. Just a temporary escape. Nothing more. Riley's POV. The sweet smell of banana muffins filled the air, and I smiled, sinking deeper into the soft sheets. This was home. I could almost hear Jerry downstairs, keys jingling in his pocket as he prepared for work. For a moment, everything was peaceful. Everything was how it was supposed to be. But the illusion shattered. My foot hit something cold and I opened my eyes. Reality returned with a harsh reminder. This wasn't home. I wasn't in my warm, familiar bed. I was in a small, worn prison cell. The muffins I thought I smelled were nothing more than the bland porridge served to inmates each morning, and the jingling keys belonged to a passing guard. I sighed. Sometimes, dreams only made waking up worse. Bad dream? Nathan's voice pulled me back. My heart gave a small leap when I saw him sitting at the foot of my bunk, eating. He wore only his boxers, and I quickly pulled the sheet around me, suddenly self-conscious. No, I muttered. Great dream, just a bad reality. He studied me, his expression hard to read. What's wrong? He asked. I shrugged. Just trying to figure out if you're about to kill me or give me a hug. I tried to joke, though my cheeks warmed at the memory of last night. He raised an eyebrow but said simply, neither. I'm just focused on finishing this before it gets worse. He gestured to his bowl of porridge. I noticed another bowl on the table and realized it was mine. How come they brought breakfast here? It's a 2-day lockdown, he replied. All meals will be delivered. So, no showers? Not unless you want to make do with the sink. I groaned. Prison was already punishment enough. Couldn't you, I don't know, get us out of it somehow? I asked, knowing he always had connections. Riley, I'm a prisoner too. I can't just walk out when I want, he said flatly. Yeah, but you know a lot of guards. No is one thing, he interrupted. Calling them friends is another. We have arrangements, but that doesn't mean they'd let me break the rules. I bit my lip, embarrassed for asking. I got up, moving toward my things, and his gaze flickered toward me before he looked away. I felt a little sore, but brushed it off when he asked if I was okay. I went through my morning routine quietly while he watched. His silence made me uneasy, and I had no idea what was going through his mind. What did last night mean to him? For me, the feelings were still there, strong and undeniable. In the morning light, he was still everything I admired, handsome, intelligent, confident. It almost hurt to think I might not get the chance to know him beyond this. When I finished, I sat on my bed, hugging my knees and stealing glances at him. Maybe I shouldn't have pushed him last night. Maybe I should have just let it go when he said no. At least then I could have kept his friendship. Now, I wasn't sure that we had, or if I'd already ruined it. Riley's POV. What if Nathan was only holding himself together now, and later he'd lash out over what I'd pushed him into? What if it ruined the already fragile connection we had? But the biggest question was, why hadn't I thought of any of this last night, when I couldn't seem to stop myself from kissing him? "I'm sorry about last night," I finally said, chewing nervously on my lip. His gaze fixed on me, sharp and unreadable. "What exactly are you sorry about?" he asked, his tone calm but laced with something I couldn't quite place. I looked away, embarrassed. "You know, pressuring you into something when I thought you didn't want it. I feel guilty about that." Nathan chuckled lightly, surprising me enough to glance back at him. "Riley, no one can force me into something I don't want. I may have hesitated at first, but I made my choice. I was a willing participant." I frowned, not sure I believed him. "But..." He shook his head. "I'm old enough to take responsibility for my own actions. You don't need to apologize." In fact, his eyes softened slightly. "I was wondering if it's something you'd want to continue." My jaw nearly dropped. "You mean, you're asking if we could..." Words completely failed me. "I'm asking how you'd feel about us being close on a regular basis," he said, as casually as if we were discussing the weather. My heart hammered. I wanted to leap for joy, but I tried to play it cool. "Yeah, I think I could manage that." "So," I asked carefully, "would that make us something like lovers?" Nathan leaned back thoughtfully. "Something like that. But first, we need rules." "Rules?" I echoed. "Yes. What I'm offering isn't a relationship. I'm not looking for a boyfriend or a partner, or someone to confide in. This would just be physical. Can you handle that?" I swallowed hard. "Sure. Yeah, no problem. I wasn't thinking beyond that anyway." That was a lie, of course. I hope things might change with time. And if you ever feel it becoming more than that, then it ends. We go back to how things were before. "Okay, is that everything?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "Not quite." His tone grew firm. "This stays exclusive. Just between us. No one else. If you want out, say so. But until then, it's only us." I nodded quickly. "Of course, I've never been with anyone else anyway." My cheeks burned, but I noticed a flicker of something in his expression, almost like he was pleased. That small reaction made me feel warm all over. "And one more thing," Nathan added. "Keep this to yourself. No one can know." I rolled my eyes playfully. "Seriously, Nathan, who would I tell?" He gave me a pointed look. "There are ways people find out without words. So, no public displays. We act the same as always." "Fine," I said with a sigh. "But you didn't need to worry. I wasn't planning on announcing it to the world." He gave a small nod and went back to flipping through a magazine. I watched him quietly for a few moments. We'd made the deal, so why not test the waters? "So, what if I wanted to kiss you right now?" I asked, feeling both bold and ridiculous. He smirked. "Unless you want the guards catching on, I'd suggest waiting until tonight." I felt my face heat. "Wait, do you think anyone heard us last night?" I whispered, suddenly mortified. "Doubt it," Nathan said easily. "The block was noisy, and even if someone did, they wouldn't know which cell it came from." I breathed a sigh of relief. As silence settled again, I realized something. Nathan rarely talked unless prompted. He always seemed to be observing, calculating. It wasn't shyness, he just didn't waste words. Meanwhile, I could barely keep quiet for a full minute. Sure enough, within 60 seconds, I gave up. "I can't believe we're stuck in here all day. I'm going to lose my mind." He only shrugged. "Can we play a game?" I asked hopefully. He closed his magazine and looked at me, expression unreadable. "I don't do games." "It's not a silly game," I protested. "It's like 20 questions, except we each get 5. Just a way to learn more about each other." He studied me for a moment. I already know plenty about you, Riley. I blushed. Okay, I did talk a lot. There has to be something you want to know, I insisted. I'll start. Do you have a best friend? Yes. I sighed. That was the thing about Nathan. If you wanted more than one-word answers, you had to dig. Okay, who's your best friend? John. He didn't hesitate. My eyes widened. John? You mean that John, the one who's part of the crew? Nathan actually chuckled. Yeah, that John. But why? I asked, completely baffled. He's awful. I don't know. When they were giving out best friends at the carnival, he was all they had left, Nathan said dryly, and I rolled my eyes. But John's awful, and he hates me, I complained. If Nathan's best friend disliked me, then who was going to be on my side when it came to proving I was perfect for him? He doesn't hate you, Riley, Nathan said, setting aside his magazine and focusing on me at last. Of course he does. What about the time he let me get beat up by Beans? Or the way he treated me my first day in the crew? Or the fact that no matter what I say or do, he always has something against me? I could have listed more, but I figured I'd already made my point. Nathan shrugged. All right, maybe he does hate you. You're not helping, Nathan. I threw my hands up. What do you want me to say, Riley? If you really want to know how he feels, then ask him. His calm answer only made me glare harder. Note to self, never go to Nathan for moral support. Instead of arguing further, Nathan slid down onto the bed, tugged the sheet off me, and promptly went to sleep. I huffed, reached up for his sheet, pulled it down to cover myself, and not long after, I drifted off too. The next time I woke, the smell of baked beans and potatoes filled the cell. The guards had delivered lunch, and Nathan was already eating. I sat at the table, staring at my tray. I wasn't hungry, but I forced myself to eat half before pushing the rest away. Survival in this place meant not wasting food, but my appetite was gone. You should eat more, Nathan said, setting down his empty plate and moving to stand by the cell door. It's lockdown. We might not get dinner. I shook my head. I can't. It wouldn't be the first time I've gone to bed hungry. Nathan joined me at the door, leaning against the wall with one hand on the bars. When are you planning to start some courses? When I get out of here, I said simply. You know they offer classes here, right? You just have to sign up. I know, but it would be a waste to start when I'll be leaving soon. Riley, if you want to survive when you get out, you'll need an education. I turned away, annoyed. Yeah, and I'll get one when I'm out. The sentencing for murder is... Can you just stop? I snapped. I said I'm getting out soon, so leave me alone. My voice cracked with anger and frustration. I flopped back onto the bunk, facing away from him. Who'd you hurt anyway? His question came quietly, but it hit me like a punch. My throat tightened. Forget it, I muttered, blinking away tears. Then I sat up, glaring at him. What kind of person even wants to be close with someone like me? It's just us, Riley. That's all, he said calmly, but his words stung. I leaned back against the wall, exhausted and frustrated. Sometimes he could be impossible to read, cold, detached. Maybe that's why he and John got along so well. But before I could retreat into my thoughts, Nathan moved closer. He knelt beside my bunk, lifted a hand to my neck, and pulled me toward him. His lips brushed mine gently, steady but sure. The kiss was soft and grounding, nothing like his usual sharp words. Then, without another word, he pulled back, picked up his magazine, and sat down again. It felt like an apology, though he'd never admit it. The rest of the day passed quietly. I read and dozed while he did push-ups and tossed a ball around. Conversation was scarce after our earlier clash, but when dinner came, I ate every bite. About 15 minutes before lights out, I managed to pull him into another round of questions. He pretended to be uninterested, but I knew he didn't mind humoring me. So, does John know about you? About who you like? I asked on my fourth question. Yeah. His tone was clipped, not giving away much. Are you going to tell him about us? Probably not. I opened my mouth for another question, but the intercom buzzed. This is your warden speaking, came the stern voice. Fighting will not be tolerated. The next time anyone is caught, The whole block gets a week of lockdown. Repeat offenses will double the time. Consider this your warning. The message ended with a beep. Do you think anyone's going to risk it again? I asked. Yes. I groaned. I hate this place. Later, Nathan pulled out a deck of cards. We sat across from each other on the bed as he taught me poker. So far, I hated it, not because of the game itself, but because of his teaching. Nathan wasn't exactly patient. If you didn't get it the first time, he grew frustrated. By the third time, his sharp looks made me too nervous to focus. Ever heard of going slow? I asked after another mistake. If I go any slower, we'll just be staring at cards, he replied smoothly. I tossed my cards down. I don't want to play anymore. Trust me, what you were doing didn't even count as playing. That's because you're terrible at teaching. I'm glad no one ever put you in charge of a classroom, I muttered. What did you even do before this, anyway? This and that, was all he said, clearly avoiding the question. Then why are you in here? I pressed. He shoved the cards under his bunk without answering. Don't they do spot checks? I asked. Yeah. So, what happens if they find contraband in a cell? Solitary confinement. My eyes widened. Solitary? How often do they check? Whenever they feel like it. And if they find all your stuff? Solitary, he repeated, his casual tone both infuriating and oddly impressive. You done asking questions? He asked finally. I shrugged. Maybe. He gave me a long look, then smirked. Then why don't you come over here and give me a kiss? My grin spread before I could stop it. I knew that glint in his eyes. It meant tonight would be anything but ordinary. Chapter 9. Riley's POV. The next few days passed much like all the others, with the addition of the secret moments Nathan and I shared at night. The more it happened, the more I found myself drawn to him. It was almost like an addiction, but I forced myself to stay in control during the day, when we had to blend in with the others. Even then, we sometimes slipped up. We had grown so used to each other, talking, sitting close, brushing shoulders, that even in the open space of the prison yard, I had to remind myself not to reach for his hand or make a casual joke that only we would understand. Just this afternoon, in the cafeteria, Nathan had unconsciously reached across the table to brush a crumb from my cheek. He froze halfway through the motion and stopped himself, but not before I noticed. Thankfully, no one else seemed to catch on. Still, it made me realize how dangerous our comfort had become. If anyone suspected, everything we had could unravel. I needed to be more careful. That's why I deliberately sat farther away from him than usual that day. No one commented, but I noticed a few curious glances. Nathan, however, seemed completely unbothered, his focus elsewhere. He sat with a small notepad, scribbling away, and when he briefly glanced at me, I rolled my eyes. Only Nathan would be bold enough to carry a pencil out into the yard, ignoring the rule that they stay in the library because of how easily they could be turned into weapons. Was it bravery or recklessness? You know, if the guards catch you with that, you'll be in trouble, I muttered, unable to stop myself from worrying over him. He looked over, smirking in that calm way of his. I've been here 2 years. I think I can take care of myself, kid. I glared, but before I could reply, John cut in with his usual sneer. Why don't you give him a hug and a kiss too, since you care so much? I clenched my fists. Being around John for even 5 minutes always made me want to strangle him. I swear, you act like a child sometimes, I snapped. John only chuckled, clearly enjoying himself. I know you have a problem with me being part of this crew, I continued sharply, but I am, so maybe it's time you got used to it. I'm sick of your attitude. You're both acting like kids. Quiet down so I can think, Nathan interrupted, shutting both of us up. I slumped back in my seat muttering, no wonder you two are best friends. What was that? John growled, but Nathan cut him off again. We're going to have to ease up on deliveries for a while, Nathan said, shifting the group's focus. We stretched it too long. They'll start getting suspicious. Suspicious of what? My head snapped toward him. Suspicious about what? As usual, no one answered me. We can probably manage 3 more runs, once a month, before we leave, Eddie offered. My eyes narrowed as I scanned each of them. John, Eddie, Nathan. What do you mean by that? What's going on? But Nathan only shrugged it off, as though it was nothing. Don't read into it, Riley. Why not? I've been part of this crew for months now. Why can't you just trust me? My voice cracked slightly, my frustration seeping through. Trust you? John scoffed. What do we even know about you, kid, other than the fact that you're a murderer who got caught? I turned to Nathan, silently pleading for him to defend me. But he didn't. Like I said, he repeated firmly, it's nothing to worry about. Then, without another word, he stood and walked toward the fence where a guard was waiting. I turned away, stung and annoyed. I'd try to pry it out of him later, but honestly, I wasn't confident he'd tell me the truth. Nathan's POV. I noticed Riley's shoulders tense as I walked toward the fence. Maybe he'd pieced together too much. Or maybe the operation itself was wearing on him. Either way, I needed to give my update first before I heard something I wasn't ready for. We're putting the information exchange on hold for a while. We'll just sell the contraband for now, I told David, the guard on duty, and a trusted friend in this mess. He nodded. How long this time? 3 weeks. Maybe less. I'll keep you updated. Doesn't matter anyway, David said grimly. The lead was wrong. The guards aren't in on it. At least, not the ones on my shift. They're clean. I gripped the fence tightly, jaw clenching as I held back the string of curses building in my head. Great, I muttered under my breath. Another dead end. 2 years on this case. 2 years with nothing to show for it. In 3 months, we'd be pulled out. What would we have to report? A handful of false leads and wasted time? I thought about Diego. He'd risked the most, pushing himself into DeFox's crew just to get close to the leader. It had taken him more than a year to become DeFox's right-hand man, and now, it might all be for nothing. I forced a deep breath, reminding myself not to fall apart. You ready to hear my side now? David asked. Go ahead. Turns out DeFox really is in on it, but only as a middleman. The real boss isn't a guard, it's the warden, Nate. I froze. The warden? David's face was serious. There's a lot more happening here than just a small contraband ring. This is bigger than we thought. I stepped closer, lowering my voice. The prison warden? Are you certain? He nodded. The weight of it hit me hard. We'd been sent in as a crew of over 25 highly trained agents, tasked with uncovering the leader of a large-scale drug ring. We thought it was an inmate. We were wrong. The warden, the man with the clean record, the badge, the reputation of integrity, was behind it all. Gathering proof on him would be nearly impossible. And with only 3 months left before we were pulled, I wasn't sure we could pull it off. I need to talk to the captain, I muttered, already running through the risks in my head. David stared at me in surprise. You know we can't bring the captain here. It'll ruin the entire operation, David told me, looking at me as though I'd lost my mind in the few seconds it had taken him to break the news. I shook my head. No, not here. I need to meet him outside. He was already shaking his head before I could finish. This isn't a request, David. It's an order. Make it look like I've got a court appeal date coming up or something. You're resourceful, you'll figure it out. Just get me outside as soon as possible. I need to sit down with the captain. Make sure the guards who escort me are all bureau agents, and you need to be there too, I pressed firmly. It's not that simple, Nate. The paperwork alone would be a nightmare. The warden would need a notice of appeal filed in advance, signed and approved by the proper authorities. I can't just have you out in a few days. We're under the radar for a reason, which means we don't have the support we'd get if the whole bureau knew about this operation. I clenched my fists, wishing I could reach through the fence between us and shake him. I know all that, David, but you were chosen for this mission for a reason. Get it done, or we're all finished. Understand? He let out a long sigh and ran a hand through his hair. All right, I guess I don't have a choice. I'll find a way to make it happen. That's what I needed to hear. Now, we don't have much time. Give me a rundown of what you found. Riley's POV. I was sitting quietly, trying to soak up as much sun as I could, when it happened. Nathan was still talking with the guard, my crew was chatting among themselves, and I was finally enjoying a rare peaceful moment, until a shadow blocked my light. I blinked up at the guy standing over me. Right away, I could tell he wasn't comfortable. His quick glances toward John and even Nathan across the yard told me there was more to his unease. "Can I help you?" I asked, unsure. I recognized him as one of the newer inmates. He'd been brought in about 2 weeks ago, but I'd only ever seen him from a distance. "Hey Riley, can I talk to you for a minute?" he said, more confident than he had looked a moment earlier. I straightened in surprise when I realized he knew my name. "What do you need to talk to him about?" John cut in before I could respond, and as always, his tone grated on me. "Sure, what's up?" I said, ignoring John and focusing on the stranger. Do you think we could talk, just the two of us?" I glanced at the others who were watching us, then over at Nathan across the yard. With a shrug, I stood. "Yeah, okay." I made a conscious decision not to stray too far from my crew, just in case this was some kind of setup. The guy seemed content to stop a few feet away, far enough that the others couldn't hear, but close enough that they could keep an eye on us. "I'm Kyle, by the way." He offered his hand, and I shook it. "Riley." "Yeah, I know," he said with a small smile, reminding me he'd used my name earlier. I studied him for a moment. He looked only a year or two older than me, young, with features that didn't quite belong in a place like this. "So, what is it?" I asked when he just kept looking at me. I was thinking, maybe we could be friends. I raised an eyebrow. "You called me over here just to ask if we could be friends?" He nodded. "I don't have time for games," I muttered, turning back toward the others. Before I could take a step, he reached out and grabbed my arm. I spun around, ready to defend myself, but froze when I saw the expression on his face. "I swear, it's not a game. You don't know what it's like to feel completely alone in here," he said quietly. And just like that, my irritation softened. Because I did know. I remembered what it was like when I first came here, and if it hadn't been for my crew, I wasn't sure how I would have made it. "Why me?" I finally asked. Kyle let go of my arm and shrugged. "I don't know. You just seem real. Less likely to hurt me than the others." He gave a nervous chuckle, and I offered a small smile in return. "All right, maybe it wouldn't hurt to have a new friend," I said cautiously. His grin lit up his whole face, breaking some of the tension. We stood in silence for a moment until I asked, "So, how'd you end up here?" "Hit and run," he answered honestly. "No one was hurt, but I would have gotten years if my lawyer hadn't worked things out. I'm serving 3 months and community service after I get out." "You must have a good lawyer." "Yeah. My dad." "Your dad's your lawyer? That's pretty fortunate." He shrugged. "What about you?" "Murder," I said simply, trying to sound casual, though I braced for his reaction. "Murder, huh? So, did you do it?" That was the moment I knew Kyle was different. He didn't assume. He didn't judge. He just asked. "No. I'm innocent." "Guess my lawyer wasn't as great as yours," I replied lightly, and he chuckled. "Which block are you in?" I asked, leaning back against the wall. "B block. Ground floor." I frowned. "You're in my block? How come I've never seen you?" He smirked. "Maybe because your cellmate keeps such a close eye on you, you don't notice much else." I flushed. "What do you mean?" "Let's just say, if anyone even looks at you wrong, your cellmate looks ready to start a fight. Kind of like the way he's looking at me now." I followed his gaze. For a brief second, I caught Nathan watching us before he turned back to the guard. A strange warmth spread through me. Nathan's POV. "Nate, are you listening to me?" I tore my eyes away from Riley and the new guy he'd been talking to. Something about that kid didn't sit right with me. He had shown up out of nowhere, and I couldn't shake the feeling he wanted something from Riley. But what? And who was he, really? "Nate." David called again, snapping me back. "Sorry, what did you say?" I said the cellmate transfer request you put in last month was approved. As soon as the supervisor signs off, Riley will be reassigned to another block. I froze. I had completely forgotten about that request. Cancel it. I made a mistake. The buzzer sounded, signaling the end of yard time. "We'll finish this tomorrow," I muttered, heading toward the gate that led the inmates back to their cells. Riley's POV. That night, Nathan and I sat in the quiet of our cell. I leaned against him, my head resting on his shoulder, while his hand absent-mindedly played with my hair. It was one of those rare moments where everything felt right. "What did that guy want today?" Nathan asked softly. "Cut? He just wants to be friends, I think." Nathan frowned. "Nobody here just walks up to someone looking for a friend." I sighed. I knew this was coming. Nathan was always cautious, sometimes to the point of suspicion. "I get what you're saying, but he honestly just seemed lonely." "I don't trust him," Nathan replied firmly. "You don't even know him," I argued, turning so I could see his face. "How can you be so sure?" "Instinct," he said flatly. "Well, my instincts say he's harmless. Besides, it's not like I'm going to share secrets with him or be alone with him. I'll just be his friend. That's all." Nathan didn't respond right away. His silence stretched long enough that I finally blurted out the thoughts circling in my head. "Are you jealous?" I held my breath, waiting. "Is there something I should be jealous about?" he countered. "No," I said quickly. "I was just wondering." Another pause. "Kyle said you look at me like I belong to you," I added with a small chuckle. Nathan stiffened slightly. "Kyle's imagining things." His words were calm, but the tension in his body told a different story. I bit back a grin. "Just be careful, Riley. You don't know this guy," he warned. "If I didn't know better, I'd say you actually care," I teased gently. "Of course I care," Nathan said, more serious now. He sat up and I followed. "Just because we've got rules doesn't mean I don't care what happens to you. I may not be looking for anything permanent, but I wouldn't sit back and watch you get hurt." His tone carried a weight that made me swallow hard. I hated when he got this serious. It always made me feel guilty. So I tried to change the subject. "I can't wait to see Jerry tomorrow," I said. Jerry hadn't been able to visit since the lockdown, and I missed him. "What time?" Nathan asked. "In the morning. He's bringing me more books." "That's good," he replied, but his voice was distant. The warm mood we'd shared earlier had slipped away, replaced by something heavier. I sighed. "Look, I'm sorry I implied you didn't care. I know you do. I was just kidding. It's fine. Let's just get some sleep." Nathan lay back down, and I shifted beside him. But I couldn't let it go. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure. Are you and the guys planning to escape? Is that what your conversation was about today?" Nathan groaned. "Not this again." "Well, are you?" I pressed. "No, Riley. We're not planning anything. We'll serve our time and leave when we're legally free." His tone was clipped, but I wasn't convinced. "Then what did Eddie mean when he said something about leaving?" "You misunderstood. It's not important. Drop it." "I just wish you'd tell me," I whispered. "I swear I wouldn't breathe a word." I tugged on his arm until he turned to face me. "You'll know everything when the time is right," he said firmly, and I tried to believe him. "Would you take me with you if you ever did escape?" The question came out before I could stop myself. The thought of him leaving without me was unbearable. "Riley," he sighed, exasperated. "Would you?" I insisted. "Yeah," he finally said. "Yeah, I'd take you with me. Happy now." Before I could respond, he pulled me down and tickled me until I was laughing so hard I could barely breathe. "Stop," I gasped, pushing against him. "You done with the questions?" He teased, laughter in his voice. I'm done. I squealed, and he finally let me go, pulling me close against him. "You're the moodiest person I know," I sighed contentedly. "And you never stop talking," he shot back, nipping at my ear playfully. I laughed, warmth spreading through me. "I don't know what I'd do without you. You've made this place bearable." "You'd be fine," he said, though I could tell he didn't quite believe it. "No, I wouldn't. But I'm glad you're here. I just want you to know that." He gave me another playful nip, and I laughed again. "I wouldn't leave you behind if I ever escaped," he said with a smirk. "Because you'd probably drive your next cellmate crazy." "Shut up." You just don't want to admit how much you'd miss me, I teased. Confident, aren't you? He chuckled and I snuggled closer. We fell into silence after that, each lost in our own thoughts. Before long, Nathan's breathing evened out, and I realized he had fallen asleep. I lay awake, staring into the dark. Our pillow talk was over, but my mind was far from settled. I still had so many questions, and I couldn't shake the feeling that Nathan was keeping secrets I wasn't ready to hear. Chapter 10. 2 days after our short-lived pillow talk, I found myself mopping floors with the rest of the inmates in my service pool. I'd been reassigned back to clean-up duty yesterday morning after enjoying the lighter kitchen work ever since my run-in with Beans, and I already missed it. Scrubbing floors and cleaning grimy toilets wasn't exactly my idea of a good time. The only upside was that Nathan and a few members of my crew were also in my service pool, and my new friend Kyle was right there beside me, mop in hand. He grinned when our mop handles clashed, and I stifled a laugh. Talking wasn't allowed during cleaning duty, but when he winked and moved farther away to mop up a spilled drink, I couldn't help smiling back. Sometimes I wondered how I'd gotten lucky enough to find a friend like him here. In just 2 days, I'd grown to feel as though I'd known him for years. He wasn't difficult to get along with, he laughed at my corny jokes, and while he admitted to being guilty of the crime that had put him in here, he never judged me for my own situation. He believed I was innocent, and for the first time in a while, it felt like I had someone besides Jerry in my corner. I pressed the mop across the uneven tiles again and again, flexing my cramping fingers. Who would have thought prison life could ever feel even a little more bearable? Somehow, I had both a new friend and, strangely enough, someone I could call a partner in Nathan. What are you smiling at? Get back to work, Kyle teased when the guard's back was turned. That mop isn't gonna push itself, soldier, I shot back in my best drill sergeant voice. He snickered, nearly dropping his mop. You're gonna come to the gym with me for rec later, right? He asked. I glanced around to make sure the guard was still distracted. Yeah, I'm getting tired of the library anyway. I never understood why people lied about simple things until I heard myself say that. The truth was I liked the library, but sometimes it was easier to just go along with people. How come you don't do rec with your crew anyway? I always see them in the gym, but you're never there. I shrugged. There's no rule that says I have to, is there? Wouldn't know, he replied. Never been part of a crew before. I thought you guys did everything together. Not really. Honestly, I can barely stand most of them, so the less time I have to bond, the better, I admitted, throwing a glance toward John as I spoke. Kyle caught the look and tilted his head. What's the deal with him? John? I asked. Nothing, unless you enjoy arguing with someone who thrives on being difficult every single day. That bad, huh? Kyle said thoughtfully. Worse, I muttered. I don't even know how Nate puts up with him. Kyle chuckled and shook his head. Sounds like you've got your hands full. I leaned harder on my mop, frustrated at the sticky mess someone had left on the floor. How men could still spill things all over the place in here was beyond me. So, Kyle lowered his voice. Do you think you could maybe get me into your crew? The question surprised me. Trust me, you don't want in, I said after a pause. All they do is sit around throwing insults and judging people for things they don't understand. He shrugged. It's still better than being alone. When you're solo in here, everyone thinks you're fair game. I couldn't deny he had a point. I'd been there once myself. But why my crew? I asked. There are plenty of others. Have you seen what it takes to get into those groups? No thanks, he whispered, and we both glanced around nervously. It didn't take much to start trouble here. I'm not sure I can convince Nate, but I could at least ask, I said, though I doubted Nate would trust him. Before Kyle could answer, a familiar voice cut in. Time for you to move along. Nathan. Speak of the devil. Kyle looked from him to me, then quietly stepped farther away, resuming his cleaning. Got any good books from Jerry? Nathan asked casually, matching his mop strokes with mine. Why'd you do that? I asked. Do what? Push Kyle away like that. I needed to talk to you. He was in the way, that's all, Nathan replied with a shrug. You didn't have to be so harsh. He gave me one of his looks, the kind that told me not to waste time on foolish comments. "You know, there's no reason to be jealous," I said softly. He'd never admitted it, but I wasn't naive. I could see it in the way he reacted whenever Kyle got too close. And honestly, the thought warmed me more than I cared to admit. "You shouldn't assume things," he said simply. "Good thing I don't have to assume. Kyle's just a friend. I'm not running off into the sunset with him or anything." Nathan didn't look convinced. "Just remember our deal. The minute you decide to look elsewhere, what we have is over. You'll need to find yourself another cellmate." I stared at him. "That wasn't the deal. You said." "That's the deal now," he interrupted, before walking off to clean another section. I clenched my mop, half tempted to fling dirty water at him. Only Nathan could make me feel safe and cared for one moment, then utterly exasperated the next. I just hoped, deep down, that he was starting to feel something real for me too. Much to Kyle's disappointment, I missed rec time that day because of an unexpected visit from my attorney. After half an hour, I left the meeting room feeling much the same as I had going in, slightly hopeful, but mostly discouraged. "We're doing everything we can to persuade the court to grant an appeal," my attorney said, his expression serious. "But I won't sugarcoat it, Riley, your case is difficult. If only that incident hadn't happened in front of witnesses." "Yeah, well, nothing I can do about that now," I muttered. "Weren't lawyers supposed to make you feel better? Just be honest with me, do I have any chance of getting out of here?" I couldn't bring myself to look at him as I asked, afraid of what I might see in his eyes. "There's definitely a chance," my lawyer replied. "But I need you to write a letter to the judge. It could help your case." My brows furrowed. "A letter?" "Yes. The court already has the facts and testimony. What they need now is something that appeals to their hearts. Tell them who you are, your dreams, how you feel about the crime you've been accused of. Anything that could make them see you as more than just a case file." I took in a slow breath and let it out. He gave me a small, practiced smile. "Get it to me before the week is out," he added. "I'll review it and send it off." He left not long after, and I found myself eating dinner in silence while the noise of the cafeteria grew around me. "You okay?" Nathan asked. His expression was serious, and for a moment I wondered if what I saw in his eyes was genuine concern. "Stop babying him, Nate," John cut in before I could answer. "He's gonna be here a long time. He needs to toughen up." With the mood I was already in, I knew that if I said anything, it might only end badly for me. So instead of replying, I stood up and walked over to Kyle, who was sitting alone. "Hey man," he greeted as I dropped into the chair across from him. I sighed and rested my forehead on the table. "I'm gonna assume you had a fight with John," Kyle said after a moment. "He's staring at you like he's ready to drag you back over there." "Didn't fight with anyone. Just tired of them," I muttered. "Maybe we should start our own crew." He laughed. "I wish. So, did you ask Nate if I can join?" His hopeful tone made me feel guilty. "Nate's not gonna let you in," I said gently. "He doesn't trust people easily." Kyle's face fell. "But did you ask him? Maybe he'll listen to you." I shook my head. "I don't have to. He told me straight out he doesn't trust you. If I asked him now, he'd just say no." Kyle went quiet, and I knew my words had stung. Days like this, I found myself wondering if I should just leave the crew altogether. "Sorry man," I said after a while. He stood, dropped off his tray, then returned. Instead of sitting, he looked down at me. "I've got a visitor, so I gotta go. But, just ask him anyway, okay?" I didn't have the heart to say no, so I nodded. He walked off, and just before passing my cruise table, he gave John a look I couldn't quite read. It wasn't until later that I would understand it. As soon as I put my head back on the table, Nathan slid into the seat beside me. I lifted my head to meet his eyes. "You ready to tell me what's got you acting like this?" he asked. "Nothing." I expected him to be annoyed, but he stayed calm, watching me closely. "Really, it's not a big deal," I added. "Just dealing with some stuff I don't want to talk about." I even forced a half smile, and he nodded as if he understood. "You shouldn't let John get to you. That's just the way he is. You'll have to get used to it." I turned and glared at John, though he didn't notice. "He's impossible. I can't stand him," I muttered. Nathan chuckled, and despite myself, I found a smile tugging at my lips too. "He's not that bad once you get to know him," he said. "Is he one of those people who shows affection through insults?" I asked sarcastically. Nathan only raised an eyebrow, and I shook my head. "That's what I thought. He's impossible, I'm impossible, and we both know it. You don't need to defend him." He shrugged, then shifted the subject. "Anyway, I just wanted to let you know, I have a court appeal in the morning. They're transferring me out in a few minutes." My jaw dropped before breaking into a wide grin. "That's amazing, Nate. You actually got an appeal." I was genuinely happy for him. It wasn't until later that I realized an appeal meant he could be free sooner than expected, and what that might mean for us. "So, when will you be back? Do you think you've got a strong case? Where will you stay tonight?" I fired off questions without pause. He chuckled, eyes glinting with amusement. "My lawyer seems confident. They'll hold me in a courthouse cell, and I should be back tomorrow evening." Before I could reply, a guard I hadn't noticed appeared and tapped Nathan on the shoulder. He stood. "I'll see you tomorrow," he said simply. I wanted to wish him luck, tell him I'd miss him, maybe even hug him. Instead, I just nodded and watched as he walked away with the guard. It wasn't until later that the realization struck me. Kyle's look at John earlier had been almost the same one I gave Nate every day. Kyle had a crush on John. Nathan's POV. I pulled the book from my pocket and studied the cover. I'd arranged for it to be delivered earlier, and I hoped Riley would like it. The guard cleared his throat, urging me to move. I set the novel on Riley's bunk and turned to go. The cuffs clicked around my wrists, and I drew in a steady breath. I'd been waiting for this appeal ever since the case began, wishing for it to be over so I could return to my life outside. And yet now, with the chance to leave, even for one night, I hesitated. It surprised me, but I knew exactly why. It wasn't about the court, or even my freedom. It was about him. As I walked between the two guards escorting me to the courthouse, I realized something unsettling. For the first time since I'd been locked up, I didn't want to leave him behind, not tonight, and maybe not even when I finally left this place for good. Chapter 11. Nathan's POV. Too much has gone into this already, Nate. I can't give you boys any more time. I wasn't surprised by the chief's words. We'd had 2 years to make progress, and only now, just over 2 months before the deadline, we were finally making a breakthrough. If we didn't take them down now, 2 years of our lives would have been wasted. I couldn't let that happen. "Sir, this could be the biggest case our department has seen in years. This drug operation could save the lives of hundreds, maybe even thousands. We can't afford to walk away." "You don't need to convince me, Grayson. I know what's at stake. But there's only so much I can do. I gave you 2 years. Now I'm giving you 2.5 more months. If it's not done by then, that's it. Case closed." And there it was, the weight of it all. 2.5 months to bring down the powerful warden of a maximum security prison. "Then I guess I don't have much of a choice," I said quietly. The chief turned toward the tall glass windows of his office. "You have a lot of planning to do." I glanced down at the burger and fries sitting untouched before me. My stomach growled, but the thought of eating while my men were still inside that prison, struggling for scraps, felt wrong. Still, I forced myself to take a bite. My mind raced through strategies, rejecting one after another, trying to find the path that would actually work. I had exactly 5 hours before I'd be escorted back to the courthouse, and then back into prison. I both dreaded it and was eager to return. The chief and I had gone over the plans so many times that it was practically etched into my memory, but knowing the plan didn't make it any less risky. I stood and paced the office, my thoughts consumed with the possible outcomes. 2 years of undercover work all came down to this. One wrong move, and everything would collapse. It was in the middle of my pacing that the chief re-entered the room. His expression was the same as always, mildly annoyed, slightly dissatisfied. I knew my next request wouldn't help his mood. "I need you to get me the file on one of the inmates. Riley Parker." The chief sat at his desk, shuffling papers. "Riley Parker? Is he one of D. Fox's men?" "No. He's my cellmate. I figured it was better to be upfront. The chief's brows furrowed, and he leaned forward with sudden interest. Your cellmate's involved? Why didn't you say so? You've got the perfect opportunity to gather information on the warden. His excitement was obvious, but I had to set the record straight. No, he has nothing to do with the operation. He's completely unaware of it, I said quickly, watching as his enthusiasm faded. Then why do you need his file? I just want to know who I'm living with. Can't be too careful. My tone was casual, but his narrowed eyes told me he wasn't buying it. Still, he nodded. I'll have it delivered within the hour. Now go make yourself scarce, I've got calls to make. I stepped out into the hallway of his home. It was only the second time I'd been here, and once again, I couldn't help but notice the opulence. Wealth had bought him this life. I wandered through the hall, deciding to take a quick look around to pass the time. An hour later, I stared down at the file in front of me, questioning myself. Why was I doing this? Where was the Nathan who used to be laser-focused on the mission? The man who promised himself never to get distracted? With so little time left, I felt like a stranger to myself. I needed to understand who Riley really was. Why was it so easy for me to accept him, despite knowing he might have a dark past? I turned the first page, ready to uncover everything about him. Riley's POV. I never thought it would happen, but with Nathan gone, Kyle had somehow become the bravest guy around. By the time lunch rolled around, he'd managed to slip right into the crew, chatting with them and making himself comfortable. It was strange to see, but also kind of exciting. What surprised me most was how the crew responded. With the exception of John, of course. At first, they were shocked by Kyle's boldness, but when he didn't back down, they started to warm up to him. Soon, an actual conversation was happening at a table that was usually somber and quiet. It made me realize something. Nathan was the one who kept these guys in line. When he was around, they joked and teased each other, sometimes at my expense. But with him gone, they were different. Freer, yes, but also wilder. Loud enough to make me glance at the guards nervously every few minutes. I wasn't going to ruin their fun, but it was clear why they needed Nate's presence. And Kyle, his attraction to John couldn't have been more obvious. Every chance he got, he tried to bring John into the conversation. John acted annoyed, but I could tell he didn't completely hate it. The smirk on his face gave him away. Overall, it had been a good day. I wasn't any more accepted than before, but I enjoyed watching the crew interact with Kyle. He fit in better than I expected. Still, I missed Nathan, more than I thought I would. I'd grown so used to having him close, so used to falling asleep in his arms, that last night I couldn't sleep at all. I kept my eyes on the clock hanging on the cafeteria wall, waiting. He'd said he'd probably be back by evening. I don't know, man, my brother's crazy. So, he jumped off the roof, landed on the... Kyle's story faded into the background as I turned my attention back to the book Nathan had left for me. It was a mystery novel, not my usual choice, but I was already halfway through. And for a little while, it helped me pass the time until Nate came back. Nate. I looked up at John's voice, and an involuntary smile spread across my face when I saw Nathan walking toward our table. He gave John and the others a polite nod, though I noticed their questioning looks. Then his eyes narrowed slightly as they passed over Kyle, who suddenly went silent, before finally settling on me. Nate, we have things to discuss, John said quickly, standing as if to follow him. But Nathan held up a hand to stop him. We'll talk later. Right now, I need to have a word with Riley. His tone was calm but firm, and for the first time I noticed just how serious his expression was, more than usual. For reasons I couldn't explain, guilt twisted in my stomach. John shot me a glare, but I ignored it and followed Nathan to an empty table at the edge of the room. So, how was your trip? I asked awkwardly as we sat down, cracking my knuckles against the table to ease my nerves. Insightful, was all he said, his gaze steady and heavy, making me feel like a child being scolded. I'm going to ask you one question, he said quietly. And I need you to be honest. My heart pounded. Okay. Did you murder your mother's ex-boyfriend? His voice was calm, but beneath it I sensed something dangerous, something I didn't want to provoke. I didn't even ask how he knew the details. It was clear my answer was the only thing he wanted. Straightening in my chair, I looked him directly in the eyes. I didn't murder him. I didn't murder anyone. I'm innocent. He studied me for what felt like forever, as if searching for something hidden. Then, slowly, the tension in his face eased, and I thought I saw a flicker of acceptance. "What happened?" he asked gently. That was where I drew the line. I had spent years trying to bury those memories, and I wasn't about to relive them. Not here, not in a crowded cafeteria. "I'll tell you, but not now." "Not today," I said, glancing away. His gaze softened. "You've been reading the book." I looked back, surprised by the change in his expression. I smiled faintly and held up the novel to show him my progress. "Yeah. I'm halfway through." I hesitated before asking the question I dreaded. "How did your appeal go?" His expression shifted, sadness mixed with something like guilt. "My sentence has been reduced. I'll be out in 2.5 months." The words hit me like a blow. I should have congratulated him. Instead, I just stared, stunned and horrified as the meaning sank in. He was leaving. Not for a day. Not for a week. Leaving for good. I swallowed against the bitter lump in my throat, blinking back tears. My mouth opened and closed uselessly before I finally managed. "That's a good thing, right?" I wanted him to tell me I had misunderstood. That he wasn't going anywhere. That I wasn't about to lose the one person who mattered most. His small smile was tinged with pity. "Yeah. I suppose it is." I forced a breath and pushed up from my seat. "I'm gonna go back to the guys now." "Are you sure?" His voice carried concern, but it only made the ache sharper. He was leaving. What did it matter anymore? I walked back to the table, sat in my usual spot, and stared hard at the scratches in the wood. Nathan followed, pulling up a chair beside me, but I couldn't bring myself to look at him. "What's his problem?" John muttered, his tone sharp. "He got some bad news," Nathan replied. Those 4 words broke me. Bad news. That meant he understood. He knew how I felt, that his leaving was more than I could bear. And with that realization, the walls I had built finally crumbled. Tears blurred my vision. My shoulders shook as quiet sobs escaped me, my heart splintering under the weight of what I couldn't change. I wished desperately I could run, hide away in my room, cry where no one could see me. Instead, I sat in a crowded cafeteria, head against the table, falling apart. Hands touched my back and shoulders, some gentle pats, others tracing circles meant to soothe. I couldn't tell who was who, and I didn't care. Nate was leaving and nothing else mattered. "It's okay, Riley," I heard Kyle whisper, his hand rubbing circles into my back. "Whatever it is, we'll get through it. I'll help you." Another hand smoothed over my hair. Ironically, the crew chose this moment to show kindness, when all I wanted was for them to disappear. When the sobs finally slowed, I kept my forehead pressed to the table, ashamed to face anyone. The silence at the table was deafening. Then I felt a hand rest gently on my arm. "Are you okay?" Nathan asked softly. Of course I wasn't. The man I loved was leaving in 2 months, and with my luck, I'd never see him again. But I nodded anyway. His hand fell away, and a moment later, he rose from the table. Someone left with him, though I didn't look to see who. I just sat there, cold, empty, heartbroken. The buzzer sounded for recreation period. I pushed myself up and joined the crowd heading to the library. I needed space. I needed my books. I needed to be alone. On my way to the library, I spotted Nate leaning against the far wall, deep in conversation with John. Quickly, I looked away. Seeing him stirred emotions I wasn't ready to face again, and the last thing I needed was a repeat of my earlier breakdown. The quiet of the library was a comfort, wrapping me in a calm I desperately needed. But it didn't last long. To my surprise, Kyle, someone who usually avoided books at all costs, dropped into the chair across from me. His expression was unusually soft, touched with concern and maybe even hope. I didn't have the heart to send him away. "You want to talk about it?" he asked gently. And to my surprise, yes, I did. I needed someone to share my burden with, and Kyle, of all people, felt like the right one in that moment. Nate's appeal came through, I admitted, fidgeting with my hands. He'll be a free man in 2.5 months. Saying it out loud made it worse, as though the reality of it had finally settled on me. And you don't want him to go, Kyle said quietly. I nodded. I know it sounds selfish. I should be glad for him, right? Happy he's getting out of this place. Who says? I looked at him, confused. What do you mean? Who says you have to be glad he's leaving? 'Cause you care about him, don't you? I nodded again. Then it's okay to feel what you feel. You don't have to pretend just because it's what people expect. Honestly? He leaned forward slightly. I think it makes you real. You're not lying to yourself or to anyone else. And that's one of the reasons I like you, you're open. I wasn't sure what to do with the compliment, so I just nodded. But fresh tears pressed at the corners of my eyes, slipping free before I could stop them. Nate's leaving, and then you'll be gone too, I whispered, my chest tightening. Do you want me to stay? Kyle asked, his expression suddenly so serious it startled me. What? He grinned, trying to lighten the mood. I'm sure I can find a way to get myself back here. You'll see me again in no time. Despite myself, I laughed. But really, Riley, he said more softly, you've got 2.5 months left with him. Make the most of it. And when it's over, when he leaves, you'll still have me. I'll visit so often you'll get tired of me. I reached across the table and gave his hand a grateful squeeze. And who knows, Kyle added with a wink, maybe I'll be visiting John too. My eyes widened. So, you do like John? I knew it. A faint blush rose on Kyle's cheeks, and I couldn't help but laugh. He's grouchy, sure, Kyle admitted, but I think I can handle him. For a moment, my troubles eased. Talking with Kyle, sharing my feelings and even laughing, helped me breathe again. The rest of the day passed in a blur. During the second hour of recreation, I stayed close to Kyle, grateful for his company. But when night fell and we were ushered back to our cells, the weight of everything returned. I climbed onto my bunk and turned toward the wall, silently hoping Kyle would leave me to my thoughts. My mind still needed space to process, and being around him made my emotions feel scrambled. But I didn't get my wish. A dip in the mattress told me Kyle had joined me. No, I just want to be by myself tonight, I said without turning. There was a pause. Then, in his usual stubborn way, he said, "Tf." He nudged me over to make room and settled beside me, wrapping an arm around me the way he often did before we fell asleep. For a few minutes, we were silent. Then I whispered into the darkness, I guess I should say congratulations, huh? I'll visit you, you know, he said softly. I shook my head. I don't want you to visit. It'll be easier that way. I'll visit anyway, he insisted. And I'll bring you some of my mom's famous carrot cake. You'll love it. A smile tugged at my lips despite myself. And I'll bring all the candy you can eat, he continued playfully. I giggled at his attempt to cheer me up. And maybe even some of those romance novels you're always reading. I don't read romance novels, I said, chuckling. Sure, you don't, he teased. Against my earlier resolve, I found myself nestling closer into his warmth. His arms tightened around me, steady and reassuring. Nate, I whispered after a long pause. Yeah, what's the first thing you're gonna do when you get out? Buy a dog, he answered without hesitation. That surprised me. A dog? I'd probably go straight for 10 boxes of pizza, burgers, fries, everything we can't get in here. I'd eat until I couldn't move. He chuckled. I've always wanted a dog. What about you? I don't know, I admitted. I like small and cute things, I guess. He laughed. I should have known. I could see you with a husky, I added. Strong, fierce, loyal. Yeah. Maybe I'll get one then. We both fell quiet. My mind wandered, imagining him outside these walls, walking his dog in the mornings, enjoying his freedom. In my dreams of his future, I had always pictured myself there too. But now, that was only a fantasy. Guess you'll want to settle down with a nice guy someday, I murmured. He didn't answer right away, and I wished I could see his face. Finally, he said, I'm not the settling down type. Me neither, I whispered. Not anymore. After another pause, his voice came low and steady. You gonna make me beg for that kiss or what? A smile spread across my face. Turning toward him, I leaned in. At first, it was just a gentle peck on his lips, then playful kisses across his cheek, nose, eyes, and forehead. He chuckled at my antics before I returned to his lips, kissing him softly. It wasn't rushed or desperate, just tender, filled with the care and affection I couldn't put into words. Slow and steady, gentle and real. Just us. In that moment, I felt safe. For however long it lasted, I was happy to be in his arms, to share something so simple yet so powerful. My eyelids grew heavy, and the last thing I remembered was my lips slipping from his as sleep pulled me under. I didn't realize then that, as I drifted off, I whispered 3 quiet words into the night. Words that made him still, words that stayed with him long after I fell asleep. I love you. What I didn't know was that those words would echo in his mind for hours, keeping him awake long into the night. Thanks for listening to today's BL story. If it made your heart skip a beat, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Only here on BL Stories, where love knows no limits.